What's the best thing about planet Earth? Welcome back to Not So Super Movie Reviews. Today we're going to be talking about Justice League. No, not the Snyder Cut. However, we will do the Snyder Cut, but before I watch the Snyder Cut, I wanted to go back and just get a fresh sense of how this movie felt to watch originally and what that cut looked like, especially so that we could kind of compare and contrast once I do watch the Snyder Cut, which will be coming pretty soon. And just to address any questions you probably didn't have, been gone for a little while. I decided to stop doing YouTube for a while. I'm back now, mostly because of the Snyder hype, but it's kind of reawoken my love for... Reawoken. That's right. It's kind of reawakened? That's right. It reawakened my love for superhero movies, and I'm actually super excited to watch it in a way that I haven't been too super excited about anything superhero related other than WandaVision in a while. So I thought we'd watch the first release of Justice League and give it a fair shakedown. Alright, so the critic score for this movie is 40%, and the user score is 71%. So even this first cut, most actual fans in the theaters said it was okay. It wasn't too bad. So let's dive right in and talk about what I think worked about this movie. First thing I gotta say worked about this movie is the casting. And I say that about a lot of bad superhero movies, but the truth is casting's not usually the problem. I mean, obviously it can be, but in this case it definitely wasn't. I think Ben Affleck makes a great Batman. I said that in my Daredevil video, which is now uncopyright claimed and you can go watch. And also I love Henry Cavill as Superman. You know, say what you will about some of these stories, and how the movies, their standalone movies, ended up turning out. I feel like the casting was pretty much solid across the board. Especially Ezra Miller as the Flash. I thought that was a really good choice. And unfortunately, this movie didn't really feel like the right fit for what they tried to do with the character. But either way, I felt like all the characters, who can forget about Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman? She makes an amazing Wonder Woman. I love the direction they went with Aquaman, with Jason Momoa. Just really brought some life to the character. So yeah, across the board, I thought the casting and honestly the acting was pretty spot on. The second thing that I think works about this movie is, you know, when the MCU proved that you could make an ensemble superhero movie and it could actually be good, I feel like most DC fanboys were foaming at the mouth to get their moment in the sun with their own ensemble movie. And then they announced Justice League, and I can only imagine that if I was a DC fanboy, I'd be super stoked about that. But even not being a DC fanboy, I still love these characters. I still grew up with them. You know, I watched Batman the animated series. I'm not an idiot. And so going to the theater and watching all these characters interact and form this super team and fight together, there are definitely still moments in this movie where it does spark something in my cold, dead heart. That about wraps up what I thought worked about this movie, and the first thing I think didn't work about this movie is the tone. DC always set itself apart with darker movies in their universe, at least recently, and I thought that was actually a good thing. You know, I don't want to go to the theater and see just the MCU formula but on a DC movie. I want to see something different. I want to see something unique. You know, whether it's Superman snapping Zod's head in a half-destroyed New York, or, you know, Wonder Woman deflecting machine gun fire in a World War I trench. These movies were always darker and grittier and more serious. You know, there was some comedy throughout, but it relied very heavily on its tone. And this movie still has that tone, like, really it does. You know, everything's dark and serious and the stakes are always high. But then, you know, and this is more than likely a result of the Whedon, you know, rewrites, reshoots and things. But they throw in all these little quips and one-liners, and it's, even though some of these jokes are definitely funny, like when Aquaman is sitting on the lasso of truth, you know, some of them are funny on their own, but within the movie, it just sort of takes you out of that dark grittiness, and it just makes it a little bit cringy because you're not ready and you're not expecting these moments of levity within this huge dark story. The second thing I don't think worked about this movie is just the disjointed and confusing nature of the story. It tries to tell so many stories at once, and it's constantly jumping around to different ideas and different things. It starts off as we're investigating this possible, apocalyptic issue, and we're going and collecting superheroes and talking to them, and then suddenly there's this guy Steppenwolf who has one of the mother boxes, and it's just introducing all these new concepts and ideas super fast. You're like, who's Steppenwolf? What's a mother box? What's going on? And suddenly it's the end of the world, and then we go back to collecting more Justice League people, and then we swap over for like a good half hour to 45 minutes of bringing Superman back to life, and we literally take the main stakes of the story and we put them off to the side for like a half an hour. So much so that even the characters in the movie just leave the mother box sitting out, So it's just all over the place, and it's constantly jumping and parkour! It never gives you time to understand what its themes, and it explains everything that happens with some kind of sci-fi mumbo jumbo, like, oh, we're just going to rip the boxes apart using Cyborg's mysterious interfacing with all machines power. And although the argument can be made that, like, well, it all makes sense in the context of the story, there's certain stretches that I feel like you just start to take advantage of the person watching the movie. And I definitely, even though I do feel like I understand what was happening, I can understand, a lot of moviegoers kind of being lost with exactly what's happening and feeling a little bit jerked around by the story. The last thing that I don't think worked about this is poor executive decisions. Firstly, and I think chiefly among them, is trying to push this movie out too soon. It feels like an attempt to cash in on the Avengers hype, more so than it did a genuine attempt to give us a good Justice League movie. For instance, when Wonder Woman's talking to Cyborg and she says, "I lost somebody I love," we all know who that is, and we know what happened, and it's tragic, and her just saying that one line evokes so much more emotion when we think about her movie and her story. But when Aquaman runs into Mira, and they have this whole conversation about him being a lost prince, and all of these things, what are they even talking about? Who even is that? What even is Atlantis? I mean, I know what Atlantis is as a concept, but in this movie, what is it? And it just seems so out of place. And I feel like they did the fans a huge disservice by not giving these superheroes, who again were cast really well, a chance to have their own movie. And I think what worked so well about the first Avengers movie, and what made it such a ignition point for a lot of people who are getting into the MCU, is that it takes the history of these movies and it starts a movie from there. So we don't have to have half of a 2-hour movie just talking about who these people are and how they met, because we already know who they are and we already know how they met. Now we can just tell a good story that incorporates all of them. And I think Justice League, them trying to make this movie before really fleshing out most of these characters in any real way is a huge disservice. I mean, imagine getting the Flash movie before Justice League. How much more weight it would have for him visiting his father. And so I feel like the fans were kind of cheated out of a couple of really good movies because they just wanted to get their Avengers out on the movie screen. And I think that more than likely that's probably what drove the Whedon cut. That the fact that he had, that Zack Snyder had this huge personal tragedy, and they still decided, well, whatever, this is a big budget movie, we can't put it on the sideline, so we're going to have this other director come in, and since, while we're at it, we might as well throw in a bunch of jokes and try to make it like an Avengers-style movie and keep it nice and short. And it's no wonder that his final vision didn't get executed. And I think that's a real shame, because DCEU definitely had a chance to carve its own niche out of this superhero hype market. You know, I don't think there's anything wrong with cashing in on the superhero hype. That's why I'm literally here making this video. It's just that there's a right way to do it. So I'm excited to watch the Snyder Cut and to see what Zack Snyder's idea of what he wanted to give the fans was, and how much closer it will be to something that personally I feel is good versus what we got here, which is pieces of a movie that were Frankenstein together to make a shorter, more Avengers-like film way before it deserved to be an ensemble superhero movie. So who was right, the critics or the users? And in this case, even though I was just ripping it a new one, I actually feel like this movie is pretty watchable, pretty entertaining. There's definitely moments throughout this movie that kind of give you goosebumps and are exciting to see. You know, for one that comes to mind is when Flash is running by Superman and Superman looks over at him and Flash is like, whoa, you know. So there's definitely times in this movie where I find enjoyment, and there are definitely moments that are satisfying to watch. You know, it's definitely not a universe-ending dumpster fire that I feel like a lot of people paint it to be. And truthfully, I have to go and agree with the users. I might rank it a little bit lower than they do, but for the sake of ease, I'm going to round it up just a little bit and agree with the users. It's not an unwatchable movie, but it certainly has its flaws. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, like it. If you have a comment, comment it. And if you want to see more of these, I might do more of them, so you might want to subscribe and turn on notifications. If you're wondering if I'm back and I'm making videos again, I don't know. We'll see. I kind of tore down my YouTube studio about a year ago when I decided to stop making videos, but I still had all my equipment, and kind of last minute I said, you know what, I want to do the Justice League and the Snyder Cut. So I'm definitely going to be doing a video on the Snyder Cut, and depending on how that goes, I might start doing videos again, but you're only going to know if you subscribe. So thanks again for coming out, and we might see you next time.